I'm not a big fan of stop motion. I'm really not.
Really?
Like it's kind of one of those modes for me where like you've got to engage me on a different level with something that's more accessible to me, and usually the most accessible stuff is stuff that stop motion animation won't do.
Yeah.
You know,
but
like,
it is a tedious process.
Yeah, I have tremendous respect for the craft. It's just more often than not the stories don't engage me.
All right, so you not like Wallace and Gromit?
Not big on Wallace and Gromit. I have a special spot in my heart for Shaun the Sheep. But then like you really got to go either hard horror with it or fantasy.
Yeah.
And outside of that, like you kind of lose me. And so that's why I really like the film that we're going to talk about today, Kubo and the Two Strings.
Very deceiving film.
Yeah, because it's like the least friendly towards children movie that Mike has ever made. And in that way, it's I respect it all the more for trying to do something completely ambitious and different. So
this is our first watch. We're going to talk Kubo. Okay, welcome to the show, and if you're a regular viewer, we appreciate it. If you're new here, this is simply just a review. I would like to thank our loyal subscribers. Please tell your friends, your girlfriends, and boyfriends about the show. It helps out. We love the comments and everything, the feedback. You can follow us on Instagram and Twitter as well. Today is Kubo and the Two Strings. What we have about here, is it a rock concert?
So, gosh, you kind of make it sound like it should be a rock concert. The film basically is kind of a parable in some ways, featuring Kubo, who's a young boy living with his mother in a small village. Kubo's never known his father. He's a fallen samurai warrior of great renown. When his mother's evil family tries to take Kubo, he finds himself on a quest with a snow monkey and a beetle on his search for a way to defeat his evil grandfather, the Moon King, who stole Kubo's eye as a child.
Okay, Kubo is from the company, how do you say it?
I think it's Laika.
Laika?
Yeah.
I'm sorry if you don't say it right. The CEO of the company, Travis Knight, this is his project. I think it was 10 years in the making.
They said it was 5 official years. Like, I think it kind of ruminated for a couple years in his head and, like, you know, around the teamwork and stuff. But they said from beginning of writing the script to the actual release was about 5 years or so.
Okay.
And it's funny because when you think of a company CEO, how often do they get the chance to hop behind and direct a film?
You have a meeting to set the meetings. Okay, so really this is like the first time watching, and I think just based on the title, I'm thinking of some kind of traveler musician, some kind of a music ole, or some kind of incorporating music, which is his instrument, his powerful instrument, which is how do you say it?
Shamisen?
Shamisen.
Yeah.
Which is Japanese guitar, and I think you have to have this brush pick to work on it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, and what's interesting about it too is I got to see this film at an early press screening a few years back, and I was initially really concerned because they gave us 3D glasses, and I was like, oh, I thought this was a 2D, and like I'm not really big on going to see 3D movies, especially because every time I go to these press screenings, I got jammed into like the corner seat. So I was concerned I was going to hate this thing just from the experience of watching it. But I loved it to the point where I had to go out and buy the 3D Blu-ray. And then this morning, before we talked about this episode, I went and watched it again in 3D because I wanted to be able to like remember those elements that I initially seen with the film. What I admire so much about this film is that it doesn't pull punches and disrespect its audience by going childish. It has childish elements to it, has family-friendly elements, but it's this is a hard movie. This is a movie about loss. This is a movie about rejecting, you know, the way that where you come from, what your family issues are, and like rejecting that and walking away from being able to let go of those problems and experience hard loss that a child would have to go through. And it's incredibly difficult to watch Kubo because, I mean, he has a missing eye. He's never known his father. His mother has brain damage from a nasty knock to the head that she had years ago. So, I mean, there's nothing like going well for him except his art and what he creates.
So the overall theme of the movie is kind of like memories and losing your memories and how do you preserve a memory. And then memory is identity of something. If you can remember who you are, and that's where you come from, and that's who you are. If you don't have a memory, are you still a bad person even though you did bad things, right? And if you can't remember if you did bad things, you could start all over again in the process. So it's definitely about memories, rejuvenations, obstacles, self-identity, and overcoming things, right? Along the journey, Kubo kind of uses this instrument almost, I wouldn't say, it's almost like a nerve, like an open nerve. Like he really doesn't really have any shields, doesn't have any weapons. But honestly, this is his tool to incorporate magic into the world.
Well, it's important to note that, I mean, general viewers might not notice this. It was something I had read about, was watching how he uses the shamisen that he has. he actually is using it not incorrectly, but he's using it in a less professional sense. When you hold the pick that is being used, he's holding it from the side. He should have his thumb on the back. So it shows a level of inexperience there too, where he's like really gifted, but he's inexperienced, and he didn't have, in a way I kind of think of it as he didn't have someone in his life to show him how to do things properly. He's kind of had to fend for himself. And like you said yourself, when you talked about memories being the central thesis that I take away from it, it's that particular line where they say memories are the most powerful kind of magic, that I had not really listened to that line when I had watched the film previously. It was in there, but it was something that I felt was all the more paramount when I really watched it this time and really let myself sink into the journey.
That's one thing, it's very thick, and I would say when this is the first time seeing it takes a long time to start. I think the first couple minutes is probably the most mundane activities because you're establishing his world. But after the journey begins, it becomes a very exciting process. I actually watched how they made this movie, and it's even more fascinating, the making of this movie, than a lot of the puppetry and all that stuff and the stop motions. There's a lot of contrast between the very bright scenes and a lot of foreboding. There's very whimsical and very reality based sometimes, even though we're doing a lot of stop out motions. Yeah,
well, and so often you have in these fairy tale, like, younger audience films, you will have like an evil stepmother or a wicked stepfather, or like you'll kind of have like one link to like a dark part of your family. In this film, the entire family is dark, and it's really the mother who's anti-dark by like rejecting that and moving out of that. And so I like too that the film kind of challenges those elements of like, you are not always where you came from. You are what you choose. Because right now, especially, I don't think the film was intentionally this way, but in the last 5 years since the film came out, we've had a lot of families broken up due to race issues, due to gender issues, due to sexual orientation issues, political issues. We've had families that have kind of found themselves rifting apart. And the film tries to reckon with that separation while also trying to find those little areas where we can connect. Yeah. And I think it's a powerful thing to do. Wonderful. And I think to give it to a child that can watch this film, because the film, there's a couple of harsher language bits, there's violence, there's murder. I mean, things are happening in this film that are very adult, but it's not watered down. I think so often we see films now where a film has to be watered down to be acceptable to kids. Well, I grew up on scary kids movies. Like, I saw some dark stuff as a child, and it turned me into the perfect human being I am today.
Kyle says it's not the story you tell, but how you tell it. And yes, this has a lot of trappings, which could be a cliche. It didn't take me very long to see what the development of the other side characters and how they portray it. Didn't tell. You see enough movies, you know what's going to happen. So you know that, but it keeps you interested to see how you're going to reveal it. And that's the thing. There's a lot of trappings of, you've seen this before, right? The mom being rejected from the family because of what Kubo and
who she chose to love.
And then you got isolation on the island, and he's very naive, but he's talented. So there's a lot of stuff, and of course you got to fight the monsters, more of the monsters. You got to fight monsters. So there's a lot of trappings of where this can be just a lazy cliche, and they make it far more appealing with a lot of the action, the dialogue.
Yeah, for me, I was really the one fault that I bring to the film is that I kind of saw where it was going almost within watching the trailer. I kind of saw where I thought it was going to go, and as the film moved on, I'm like, are they gonna go this way? I feel like they're heading this direction. That would be my one fault maybe with the film, is that because the themes of the film seem so grandiose and seem like they're not trying to water you down, some of the details in the film that you kind of see coming a mile away. But in a way, I was talking with someone else about it the other day, and they said, think of it like you know the answer, of course. There's that level of dramatic irony where but you want to see what happens how he finds out. Yes. And I think that works for me just well enough. And I really took to that. I was like, that's a really appealing idea, because I was always thinking it from my point of view. But really, just because you know how it's going to play out doesn't mean that he does. And watching him and his character growth as he learns these truths, these hard truths, really kind of captivate.
So I like a lot of the scale, though. That's a value that I really appreciate, because a lot of the people that contact that Kubo comes in contact, they're overbearing, bigger than him.
Mm-hmm.
He's very small, but he's very powerful in this world. So you get a lot of different scale and scope of this movie. It's very dazzling as well. I mean, even if the zombie person comes alive, that you have this. And I see there's a lot of video games where you have to climb on top of the mountain. Yeah. So
it felt kind of like you were playing a little bit of a video game, and I'm not saying that as a fault at all.
Yeah. And I'm done with video games, but I was like, this is very much an homage to like video games, where it could have been lazy and cliched, but it's done very well. Very well. Yeah.
And it doesn't shy away from the hero's journey. I mean, in so many of these kinds of films, the hero's journey needs to be an obvious element to it. I mean, if you lose that element to this film, you would lose what makes these kinds of journeys so much fun. So like, I like that, it's kind of the stepping stone path of unlocking these different, parts that we need to defeat the enemy. I just love, I like, again, the grandiose idea of like, let's make this the most beautiful movie we can. Let's make this the largest scale movie. I mean, when you look at some of the behind the scenes stuff, it's just how they crafted the water with these little like mechanical devices poking, and then they placed a blanket over, so it looked like it was moving on the water as they were going.
Yeah, that's
it took them, what, that 4 months that it took to build the ship, or the fact that the Skeleton King thing is like the largest ever stop motion item used in a film. And then I think they even did the second largest with the eyeball things underwater. So like they really swinging for the fences, and I cannot stress enough that how great it is to see a company that's not afraid. I mean, this is like their 4th major release, so it's not like they're not getting boring, And
Paranormal, which both movies.
And I can't remember if the Box Trolls was before or after. That was my one outlier where I really don't like the Box Trolls very much, and then I wasn't a huge fan of The Missing Link that came out like 2 years ago. So like I said, I'm kind of tough on some of these movies, but it's just because, again, I view them as, I am your audience as much as the child that is sitting in the chair next to me. I am still your audience, so you need to captivate me too.
I do like the beginning of the movie. It's very much like I would reference Prestige, because the first line is if you have to blink, do it now, because you don't want to miss everything. That's very egotistical. That's almost like this is going to be good. So, but it's a plot in the storyline as well. It's his catchphrase. Yeah, and catchphrases are, some people really hate them in movies, but if they're done really well, they can move the story along. I love the catchphrase for this, because it's also daring to this movie that if you have to blink, do it now. You're gonna miss out a lot of good stuff.
Well, as far as catchphrases go, it depends on, again, its context, and since he is a performer, performers have catchphrases, and like it works within the performance that you're giving us as viewers, but then the performance he's giving in the town too. Like, man, if he came to town and told that same story every day with the origami paper, I would still go watch it every day, because that was captivating stuff. So I kind of I appreciate that. He's kind of got his performance level that he has there too, but he's also incredibly innocent in that he does not understand the world that he's in. He spent his entire life in this village or up in the cliffs alone. And even with his mother, he's still alone.
I do like that they always show the whole island in his little journey, how small he is to the whole thing around him. So yeah, it's daring catchphrase, but it's also part of the story as well. Kind of like Prestige says, the first line of Prestige is, "Are you watching carefully?" which is a dare for you to make sure you're paying attention. Same kind of thing. Don't if you have to blink, do it now, because you really want to pay attention. But right, I think the story lags in the beginning, but it really, second and third act, perfect.
Well, what I really like about the beginning, because I'm going to kind of sway you on the beginning, I think.
All right, you're going to sell me on this. All right.
So the beginning of the film for me, I agreed with you the first time I watched it, but then upon multiple viewings, you see so many elements of. It's funny because it starts kind of with. I mean, they tell you how the story's going to go like 5 times. You hear it in those opening moments. You hear it when he's telling the story.
Yeah, so like one of those cliches.
Yeah, he's constantly telling you exactly how the film is going to play out, and even though there's a few twists near the end that I actually did not see coming. There are, he's basically giving you the entire story multiple times, but it's those quieter moments that reminded me of Ozu as a filmmaker, where his films would always be about making tea, and they would show you the entire process of making tea. And I think it's the quiet moments there, but when you watch it, seeing that homage taking place, and you see that he spends his time cooking and making fire and picking up all the papers around the home, that it's not only setting you up for these little moments that will get payoff later on, but it's also showing you that mundanity that he has, which is a big part of that kind of cultural shift in movies. Yeah. So I really like the idea of the making tea part of it all, where they show him cooking an entire meal. And it's just, the way it's edited together too doesn't make you feel like you're watching every moment, because it kind of kicks you through a few different pieces.
So, like I said, if you have patience, because a lot of the title doesn't really seem it's going to be all that appealing an adventure, even if you do a lot of the reviews, because the first couple of minutes you're like, this is going to be the way throughout the whole movie, and that's kind of deceiving. The first act really lulls you and picks up for the action, and that's why I think it's an intentional, because they, if you have contrast, if you lull you in the first act and the action is action packed, it elevates it. But right, you have to have a little more patience in enjoying the lull that he presents in the beginning, because he's just living a basic monotonous life, even though he does talent.
Yeah, I would argue Kubo and the Two Strings is the least American of the Leica films, and one of the least American animated films too, because it does tell you to have patience. It tells you this is a virtue that you will need, that this will mean something later on, and because of the patience you give to the film in the first 30 minutes, it gives back tenfold as the film comes to a close. Yeah. I think allowing you to, kind of test you in that way too, because in America, I always like the story about the Friday the 13th sequels where they had like a code. You have to kill someone or have someone get naked every 10 minutes. And it's like everything's made with a formula. And like that's kind of the different thing outside of America. So many films that are made outside of here don't have the code that we have to have. We don't have to have an explosion or an action sequence every 15 minutes. We can allow ourselves to breathe in. And I think that's, again, one of those ways that the film challenges its viewers, is that it doesn't follow a strict code outside of its hero's journey.
One of the criticisms of this movie is a lot of the voiceovers were American and white actors doing lines and Japanese characters. I think nowadays, if they did it now, they would definitely hire Japanese actors. Yeah. But it's one of the criticisms that's played out, and I think they obviously recognize that. I think the statement is, if we did this now, we would definitely hire even Japanese American actors to do the voiceovers for this.
Yeah, because it's maybe all the more noticeable when you have someone like a George Takei or a Hiroyuki Tagawa, two like legendary actors within that realm, and they're the side characters who I don't even know if they get a name in the film. I can't remember thinking of a character name. If it is, I don't think it's something that's supposed to be widely known.
But that's the importance of it.
But giving predominantly white actors, and I'm not saying any faults on Charlize Theron, Matthew McConaughey, Art Parkinson, who I was a big fan of in his few moments of Game of Thrones, voicing Kubo. I really enjoyed all of these characters and these actors and these performances, and I liked that if you didn't get told that this was Charlize Theron and Matthew McConaughey, you might not 100% get it. It's kind of like it's not really on the nose. But I do agree with you, it would have been so simple, because I don't want to demean it, but you don't need to have big name actors in an animated movie.
I think that's a production point of view, that they think it's not going to sell unless you have names.
You want names on it. And that was done by, I think, Toy Story first, when they said we have Tom Hanks and Tim Allen in our movie. And people were like, oh, there's a big person doing a voice. But I hate that that's something that's done now in the industry, is that we have talented voice actors that we could be utilizing. Right. We choose to go with the big names so that we can fill the seats in the
platform. Because they're feared they're going to lose if they don't have anybody recognize. They feel that that's not going to make any money.
Yeah, but I agree with you. I wish they had more non-white performances at the forefront of the film.
Yeah. I don't know. This is the funny thing, because this is the first time watching, and I noticed that his guitar always has 3 strings. So I've always wondered why the title is Kubo and the 2 strings. And that was a mystery kernel that I wrote in my notes. When eventually is the point of the movie going to be 2 strings? And yes, it does explain, because eventually I was like, is it an animation error? They just have 3 strings.
Well, I remember,
but it is a kernel mystery that if you're paying attention, it says, it was discovered.
Yep. And I was on a bit of a kick with Asian cinema at the time this film was coming out. I was trying to get my hands on a lot of different kind of artists and different perspectives, and knowing that too, I knew that the shamisen had 3 strings. I was something that I was very aware of, and I was like, and I didn't even know, I don't remember seeing it utilized in the trailers as much, so I was like, 2 strings, 3. I was like, what's the point of this? And it's something where, again, you could call the film a whole lot of different things.
Yeah, but there's a reason why it's called.
Yeah.
There's a reason.
And again, it's another element that kind of forces you to blink early, because then you can catch this later on.
Yeah, and of course it's a little bit like with the Avengers, a floating kind of dragon kind of a thing. Yeah, so there's a lot of references you can understand. I like that, because there has to be some kind of dragon involved.
Yeah. Well, and again, going back to it, Ray Fiennes, a fantastic performance as the grandfather, as the Moon King. We don't get to see him a lot in the movie, but it's kind of, again, using those really talented performers, it does help to have them in your movie. You just could have had someone else. But like again, Rooney Mara is terrifying as the sisters, and then you get Ray Fiennes, who was fantastic as the Moon King, and it's very Voldemortish. And I'm not going to fault that because he's terrifying. So
no, and that's one thing. It's a lot of contrast because if like Star Wars is very dark, and these evil characters are very dark. I think the sisters are very charismatic, very evil, dark, and they have one single focus. Yeah. And they're very seductive. I liked them, even though they didn't have to do very much.
Yeah. But yeah, like you said, Star Wars. I mean, in the first 30 minutes, spoiler alert, they murder his uncle and aunt. Like they are murdered horrifically. We also have in that original Star Wars film, we have someone loses a limb, and there is like
there's a lot of limb.
That blood in that first movie is insane amounts of blood.
Yeah.
And it again, like that film. George Lucas made Star Wars for kids, but he respected his audience enough to allow them to see dark material, and I think that's what's on display here, and that's why I think Travis Knight was such a perfect addition to the Transformers world when he went on and made Bumblebee next, because again, he was someone who respected the audience. He knew that he was making a film that was predominantly for younger people, and he embraced it there. So I think it's a neat translation from Kubo to Bumblebee, because again, he's working with unrealistic characters, people he can't just talk to about their performances as much.
It's really convincing, the dialogue of how the dialogue is really presented with the characters on film. I think Charlize Theron's dialogue with how they did the mannerisms, expressions with Monkey, perfect. That's scary. That was even scarily perfect, because we've seen enough animation that doesn't really match very well what they're saying, but they're really dialed into the dialogue and how the animation project the dialogue and the expressions. This is one of the best ones. Yeah.
When you hear a lot of stop motion creators talk about the art of creating that kind of stuff, they accept the fact that it's not a medium you can always go back and fix. Like once it's done, it's done.
Yeah.
And so they said there's a beautiful thing about that handmade quality to stop motion where that there are problems. When you watch the film every time, you're like, oh, that frame isn't right. Like you see like these elements as a creator of stop motion. And so that's why I'm so impressed when it's done so elegantly, as like you said, having her voice match up with the character. Like never once did I question there was a person in a sound booth recording those lines.
Yeah.
I felt like...
But sometimes it happens. I would say, and this is my first time viewing, that it's not only one of the best animation, it was one of the best films of the year.
Yep. Yeah, I remember this was made, I think it was number 3 on my list when it came out. I was so impressed with this movie. I was, one of those guys just headlong, shouting from the mountaintops, it's got to win animated feature, and it lost to Zootopia, which I thought was kind of a big missed opportunity. Nothing wrong with Zootopia, but like, Kubo elegantly portrayed both a story and a visual style that was unique, that had never been seen before on this level. Whereas Zootopia was a great movie, but I feel like also
it's just for the kids, right? It was very watered down for the kids and very animal, even though the action works very well.
Yeah.
And I still regard this as one of the best movies. And it's hard because you see the title and you look at it and you're like, why can this be fulfilling or anything enjoyable to watch? And it's a great adventure.
Yeah, I know. It was nominated for Best Animated Feature. It was also nominated for Best Visual Effects, which it lost to The Jungle Book. And it's, again, rare to have a visual effects Oscar given to a
Which is weird, because Jungle Book is like 99% computer.
Yeah. So I guess the visual effects are pretty good if they were convincing on that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting to see that kind of level of play given to it there. But I was really pushing and really hoping that this would find an audience. And I think it is. I think it was the first. I think it was the first official flop of Laika's career as a studio, which is sad because I think it's their best film, and I still agree it is their best film.
Even though I like Paranorman and Caroline.
Oh yeah, I love both those films, but like without a doubt, Kubo is the one I go back to most frequently. And again, I thought I would mention this too. If you have a 3D TV and 3D Blu-ray still, I know they still don't exist, but like this movie is phenomenal in 3D because it doesn't. There are a lot of moments where something is jumping out at the screen at you, but never once when you're watching the film in 2D does it feel like something is supposed to be jumping out at the screen. There's elements where the film has to exist on its own as a 2D film, and it also has to add something by being 3D, where I accept it going forward. And a lot of the elements of the origami usage in the film were really powerful stuff in a 3D environment.
So I say a high recommendation. I was kind of trapped with, I thought it was just going to be cliche written. I thought it was just, and there's a lot of cliches, but it's marvelously crafted.
Yeah, again, Not the story being told, but how you tell it. And I think the how is so powerful.
That was one of the delays for me. I was like, I've seen these cliches before. I kind of know where it's going. And surprisingly, you made it really entertaining to where it's going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, my big concern was this is going to be a kids movie, so it's not going to have the impact, and it really has the impact, I feel. So definite high recommendation for me as well. Every time I watch this film, I feel like I find more things I love about it, and I find more elements of foreshadowing, which is funny because again, like they warn you at the beginning, blink now because you're going to miss it if you blink later. And you know what? I missed a lot of stuff, and every single time I watch this movie, I notice a few more elements that I really appreciate that are, again, don't have to be seen, but every time you see them and you get a little extra kick about where the film is heading, it's really powerful stuff. So
if I'm emotionally invested into the paper origami samurai without doing very much, he doesn't have to do very much, but I'm emotionally invested in that.
That's true. We need to spend.
That's clever. That's really good. All right. So, have you seen Kubo with the Two Strings?
Yeah, let us know your comments down below, your thoughts on the film. Where does it stand in your Leica rating? You know, it'd be kind of fun to do kind of a rating, since there's not a lot of those films, so it's pretty easy to have seen them all. And do you feel like Travis Knight should continue making movies? Because I certainly was surprised by a CEO that has that level of respect.
That sounds like a private detective name. He should be like a private, not a CEO. He should be like, a private detective in a noir.
Well, I just feel like he's he must be like the CEO who got caught on that undercover boss thing where he's like, I've got to direct a movie so people don't know I'm the CEO.
The entire production is undercover boss. Yeah.
But whatever your thoughts on it, let us know in the comments below. Again, don't forget to like, subscribe, join the Patreon if you can. We got the link down in the description below, and you can help kind of decide where the show is heading as we head on through season 3 here. We're certainly enjoying your suggestions online. We're certainly enjoying your comments online too. We really love getting comments from y'all. It's really, really fun to be a part of. And also, I guess now, since we're ending 2016's month on an animated film, we should maybe announce that next week we are starting our next theme, animated movies. We got some criticism that we haven't done animated movies a lot, so we're going to do an entire month of some different animated films. We're going to really try and spread out and see what we have to offer for the animated realm. Nick, I'm really excited about that because it's going to be something different that I don't even have a whole lot of background.
Yeah, we're going to put some that I don't think people remember or don't really know exist, and some pretty much popular home runs that pretty common.
Absolutely. So, once again, folks, my name is Kyle Goethe, and you can find all my film reviews on goatfilmreviews.com.
I'm Nick from the St. Paul Filmcast, and I'm not Clark Kent.